Welcome. You're listening to Son of Fire, the Half-Tale Sessions. This is a place for stories spoken close to the flame, for conversations with artists, makers and creative souls, and for poems and short stories drawn from the same fire. I'm Rich McCoy, artist, writer and collector of tales. In each session, I sit at the hearth, sometimes with a guest, sometimes alone with a story, listening for what wants to be said. Half Tales lives alongside Son of Fire. Both can be found at littlehellos.com. A small doorway for listening, reading, art and staying connected. Whether you're listening from, pull your chair closer, the fire is lit.
This is a very fresh story I've written. It's short. All my pieces are short. It is in 3 parts. Each part it reveals from a slightly different perspective. I'm going to be telling more stories on Half Tales Sessions. In amongst the interviews, just to mix things up and give a little of myself as well. So here we go. This is The Keeper, Chapter 1. It is the most tempestuous night I can recall since my shift on this godforsaken rock began. I wish I'd never taken the job. Most lighthouses run themselves now. This one still needs hands. The offer had seemed a dream. The Bahamas. A weatherboard cottage came with a post, not unlike the ones back in New Zealand. Children would grow up with salt in their hair. We would be fed well. We would live in paradise. The work still smelled of metal and kerosene. Resistant, stubbornly human. All I had to do was keep the mechanism cranked so the light flashed true and keep the fuel topped. For that, ships stayed clear of the reef. For that, we were trusted and well paid. Earlier that afternoon, a raven had found its way into the lamp room. It perched atop the mechanism, black against brass, tapping its beak lightly as if testing the limits of the thing. Ravens do not belong here. I knew it without needing to check. Gulls, yes. Frigate birds, sometimes, but this. It did not flinch when I entered. Its black eyes held me, patient, unblinking. I drove it toward the door. It left reluctantly. When it was gone, the room felt larger and colder. That night, as the storm rose, I thought of the raven again. Its gaze lingering in ways I could not place. I would have given anything to be back in an English pub, or deep in the New Zealand bush, tui and piwakawaka calling, honeydew in the air. I had not known the Bahamas to feel so hostile. Waves hammered the reef. Somewhere out there were boats. It was my responsibility to keep them out there. I battened down and thought of my beloved and the children asleep in the cottage. The coffee pot gurgled. Solitude stretches differently at night. The door rattled, then thumped. At first I thought it was the weather. I listened for rhythm, for intent. After a few sips of coffee, I opened it. A man stood outside, soaked, bedraggled. A captain, I think. He said nothing. He looked like someone hauled back from somewhere he had not yet finished leaving. I pulled him inside and shut the door. As the beam swept the shore, I saw it. A ship, smashed against the reef, too close, too broken, and far too quiet for what it must have carried. Shock gave way to something harder to name. Had I failed? I wrapped him in a blanket. Told him to shed his wet clothes, offered coffee or rum. He nodded at the rum. Some simple questions. His ship? A nod. His command? Another. The only one? Again. What troubled me was not the wreck, but the way he answered, as if the questions had already been asked of him. His uniform was civilian, a cruise ship. I did not need to speak the number. I knew it to be vast. I planned to call it in once the storm had passed. There was little to do before morning. He sat for hours. staring into nothing. By midnight, neither of us had moved. He inhabited whatever remained of him. I held the room. At 3 a.m, there came a gentle tap at the door, a knock, a courtesy. The captain jolted. His chair scraped hard against the floor. He shook his head at me, pleading. Something passed between us that required no words. Outside stood a girl, 13 perhaps. Rain slicked her hair flat. Her bare feet rested on stone. Beside her stood a fawn. Its black eyes were steady, unblinking. The same darkness I had seen in the lamp room that afternoon. The girl glanced at me only briefly, then tilted her head past me to the captain. Recognition moved between them. "I'm sorry," she said gently. "Did I miss you?" The captain found his voice all at once. He bolted for the spiral stairs, shouting words that no longer belonged to any human language. The girl and fawn passed me. I felt them before I saw them. A gentle brushing, a sudden lightness, a loosening. I slid down the door frame, and the world dimmed. Morning came. The captain sat at the table, upright, hands folded. His face had settled into something almost peaceful. Not relief, not sleep. Just the stillness of a man who had finally stopped running. No sign of struggle. No one could say when he died. The storm had passed. The light had held. The beach was cleared. Fewer bodies recovered than the manifest held. Whether it was the sea that took them, or something else, I could not say. I said nothing. Out beyond the reef, the ship remained, steel torn open, cabins exposed to the sun, a carcass too heavy to sink, too broken to return. The beams swept over it again and again. Nothing more came ashore until my own days here were done, many decades later. In the years that followed, there were questions, from officials, from families, from men who had never stood alone with a working light and a dead man at their table. I answered what was asked, and no more. The sea is good at erasing details, and I learned to be the same. Yet some nights, when the beam swept the reef and found only water, I felt the weight of what I had kept. Not the captain, not the girl, but the space between them, the moment when I could have spoken and chose not to. The light still turned. Ships passed safely, but I came to understand that keeping the mechanism alive was not the same as keeping myself clean. Chapter 2. It was inevitable I would end up captaining a vessel. My father did. His father before him. Nearly every man in my family has lived this life at sea. My parents met on the Channel Ferry. What none of us expected was that the captaining I was to do was for a cruise ship in the Bahamas. I never found a woman I would call a life partner. There were many affairs, usually married women. They liked the uniform, the authority. I was never much of a catch outside of my rank, but uniform does a strange thing to desire. For 30 years I lived inside this ease. Cabins cleaned, meals delivered, dirty laundry washed, consequences delayed until the next port. On board, everything is managed, even guilt. Lately, the sea has begun to feel less like freedom and more like a habit. I catch myself imagining a small cottage on the Devon coast, a garden. This voyage's temptation takes the shape of a woman in her 30s. Black hair, dark skin, from Botswana. Beautiful in a way that draws attention without asking for it. Her husband is hard to miss. He moves slowly, as if measuring each step. Built like a wall. watching even when he appears not to be. I noticed him. Men like that mistake stillness for authority. And through it all, the light at that far-off rock pierces the night, impartial, turning over every corridor, every face, every choice I make. She tells me he tends the old ways. She says it lightly, as if translating something she should not tell. They wear no gold, no signs of wealth, only a single ring each. I notice it and dismissed it. We meet when he is elsewhere. The ship is generous with corners, distractions and alibis. I tell myself she wants this. I tell myself I'm not the first man. I tell myself she has already decided. Women like that always do. When he finds us, it is without drama. A door opens, time tightens. He throws me once. I hit the wall. A second time I'm already moving, running past faces that register what I am, and look away. Authority drains quickly when it is stripped bare. I'm not saying the storm came because of him, but I have sailed long enough to know when the air changes its mind mid-breath. I should be on the bridge, I know that. Instead I hide deep in the ship, where the engines thrum and the walls sweat. I feel the first impact through my feet, a long shudder, then another, metal complaining the hull is given up. The alarms come too late. So does courage. People move past me with eyes already elsewhere. The ship lists, screams, rise and scatter. Water finds its way in, patient and cold. When I jump, I do not look back. I fled from my duty and did not waste time naming it. I swam toward the light. I know it is still burning, and in that light, far across the reef, I sense the unblinking eye, marking every failure, every escape, impartial and eternal. Chapter 3. We had known each other since childhood. She noticed my gifts before I understood them myself. When the voices first came, it was she who taught me how to listen without being taken. Because of that, our town prospered. The sick were eased, quarrels settled, and land remained generous. In her I was given more than any man deserves. Still, there were times I wished I had been ordinary. To carry such gifts is to never truly be alone. If it was not people bringing their pain, it was the unseen, pressing close, always asking, always present. I served faithfully, but I longed for quiet. That hunger is what brought us onto the ship. At home, the land speaks, the rivers remember, but the sea belongs to no voice I know. I thought there I might rest, that we might step outside our names for a while. Instead, I wondered. Bright rooms, endless motion, distractions stacked upon distractions. I called it freedom. I called it rest. I did not see her drift until it was too late. When I found them, something in me broke open. It was not anger, as men usually know it. It was older, larger, a tearing loose. I reached outward, not with words, with need. Something answered. I did not command it. I only failed to close the door. What came was vast and indifferent. It took what was offered and more besides. When it was finished, there was no triumph, only wreckage, only the sound of water settling back into itself, and the beam still turned, turning over us all, impartial, eternal, holding our story. The price was not his alone. It was hers. It was mine. The sea carried the rest.
Thank you for spending time with this half. If something in the session stayed with you, a line, an image, a feeling you couldn't quite name, let it linger. That's how these stories work. You'll find more episodes, writing and artwork at littlehellos.com. If you'd like to support the work, there's a Buy Me a Coffee link and a PayPal option there. and soon a crowdfunding page for the Son of Fire book as well. No pressure, just an open hand. Until next time, tend your fire, listen well, and travel gently.